we've got three incredible farmers and ranchers who put a lot of the theory we've been talking about into practice. These leaders will share their invaluable insights and firsthand experience in helping to shape the direction of agricultural practices. As we did previously, each speaker will provide brief opening comments, and then we'll dive deep into a discussion with questions. So again, please load up that Q&A feature on Zoom. First, I'd like to introduce Marilyn Hershey, a Pennsylvania dairy farmer, chair of Dairy Management, Inc., and currently board member and former chair at USFRA. Good to see you again, Marilyn. I'd also like to welcome Meis, who farms corn, soybeans, and beef cattle in Nebraska, and also sits on the board of directors of the Nebraska Soybean Board, and is also a former chair of USFRA. Hello, Anne. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Debbie Lyons-Blythe, a cattle rancher in Kansas, who is former chair of the US Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Welcome. And hopefully your internet connections from out where you all are is better than mine here in New York City. Marilyn, I'd like for you to start us off with your opening thoughts.
Well, thank you, Tim. And I tell you, the panel that we follow is kind of hard shoes to fill, but it's great to be here. It's great to have this opportunity. I'm hoping as well that the Wi-Fi in New York works for me, because we are sitting in New York City, but so far so good. Dwayne and I have a dairy farm. It's a medium-sized farm. It's in, we sit about an hour west of Philadelphia. We are about 40 minutes north of the Chesapeake Bay. And so sustainability really has been part of our practices for decades. I come from many, many generations, as far back as I can research. We were dairy farmers, and changing our practices, improving our practices has always been a part of that. I remember my father making decisions on his farm to do strip cropping and rotate the crops, and that was best for the soil. And making improvements. Dwayne and I have made many improvements on our farm to improve the water quality. And each year Dwayne and I will look at the farm and we'll try to decide how can we be more efficient, how can we make improvement practices that improve our bottom line. I agree with the panelists. If the improvements we make do not help us financially, we're not going to be able to do that, because we do have decisions to make. Do we pay our feed bill, or do we make improvements? And there has to be a financial efficiency there for us when we look at those improvements. In 2017, Dwayne and I decided to put in a methane digester on the farm. Digester is not something that works for every dairy farm across the country, but it is something that has worked for us. And not only has it do we capture the methane from the cow's manure that runs through the digester, but we're also in a part of the country where food waste is prevalent, and we're able to incorporate food waste into the digester. By taking the food waste and putting it into the digester, keeps it out of the landfill. And so we can capture electricity from that as well. We have made improvements to the digester year over year, and it works for us. And so we're thankful and grateful for that opportunity. We also have incorporated feeding some food waste to the cows, and in our case, it is fruit that is brought into the ports in Philadelphia. We're able to feed that to the cows and our young stock, and by doing that, it keeps it out of the landfill and produces a lot less methane. We look at these practices and ways that we can improve, and technology and science and research will continue to show us the way. I feel like there's a lot of research that is coming. We have big goals in dairy by 2050, but also knowing that not every farm is going to do everything. I think that was mentioned in the panel before, but that all farms together collectively, we can make really strong improvements. So again, it's great to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Marilyn. Over to you, Anne.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim. Well, I'm pleased to be part of this discussion from our family farm here in Nebraska. We live in Northeast Nebraska, where we raise corn, soybeans, alfalfa, hay, and beef cattle. It certainly has been interesting listening to this wide view of these issues. And as previous chair of USFRA, I was certainly involved in a lot of these discussions. I think my role here today is to bring it down to farm level, what we are doing on our own family farm here in Nebraska and how this might incorporate into some of these discussions. So my husband and I farm with his brother and wife, and now our son has joined the operation and he becomes the fourth generation to farm our land here. As has been mentioned throughout this entire discussion, sustainability and stewardship, they are foremost in our decision making on our family farm as we strive for continuous improvement. And a lot of it is staying abreast of the latest technology that allows us to start implementing some of these practices. So as we discuss farmers, I like to think of us as the ultimate caretakers of the environment. And we look at soil, water, nutrient management, and energy use as that systems management that was talked about previously. Well, when we look at our soil, first of all, soil is the foundation for all we do here on our row crop operation. We've been no-tilling for over 20 years, and we use the corn, soy, alfalfa rotation, and that helps build some of these nutrients back into the soil. We've been experimenting and learning all we can about cover crops. And that's not something we can just do at the turn of a hat. We have been studying this and experimenting for several years now. So the decisions that lead up to this decision that we're going to plant cover crops after our soybean harvest this fall, I'd say there's probably 200 decisions to lead to this that we had to make. Purchasing a drill, finding the seed. It's really difficult to find around us. So we've decided, talked to a lot of area farmers who were first implementers. We're going to try rye as our cover crop. I know there's more environmental advantages to a mix, but we feel like rye is going to do best for ours and that we can get the best kill for our cash crop in the spring. So many issues and challenges at the practical level that we have to deal with. So getting that seed established, we're up in the northern part, we're in a more northern climate, so we don't have much growing season after we harvest our fall crop to get that cover crop established. And then we have to get a kill because we have to make a living and we have to get our cash crop in the spring. So we may graze our cattle in the spring. We'll see what the Mother Nature provides for us, and some of it we may just kill. When we started no-tilling, our planter had to be completely rebuilt. There were so many issues. To plant that new seed with all this corn stalk and soybean residue and to get a good seed established just presented multiple challenges. So we feel like we refine that every year and have rebuilt our planter many, many times. So we are definitely constantly working to create that healthy ecosystem in our soil by that living root, by that minimum or no-till. We're seeing some results. We're using less fertilizer and we're seeing a lot more earthworms and a real healthy porous soil. But it takes time, like was all said, and sometimes there's an economic setback those first years that we have to kind of withstand. Just a little side on the cover crops. We thought we had qualified for some payments with a USDA conservation program called EQIP. Well, we just found out last week we didn't qualify for that. So we're going to take the economic burden. I know we did all the paperwork. I can see Hannah's expression. We did all the paperwork. I've been researching it. So now we're experimenting. What else? What other programs out there? We're hoping we'll apply next year. Maybe we're going to try another program called Farmers for Soil Health. It doesn't pay as much, but you can't double up on them. So we kind of have to like be out there trying to figure out what's out there for some economic payments, what might be best for us. It's really confusing right now. And we're trying to sort through that with all the other decisions we make on our farm. Nutrient management has made tremendous progress as our soil mapping has developed. We soil test fields regularly. We use yield monitors to create a nutrient management plan that is precise and efficient. Gone are the days where we take a fertilizer spreader out to the field and put out a standard amount throughout the whole field. We now apply precisely the amount of fertilizer needed in the exact places in the field where the crop needs it. Using variable rate nitrogen and other micronutrient applications means we use less fertilizer. That's good for the environment. It's good for our bottom line. We do use cattle manure as a natural fertilizer when possible. And we also integrate cattle grazing into our corn stalks, which of course has benefits for our soil and it's good for the animals. Moving on to water, efficient water use is essential on our farm as we irrigate with center pivot irrigation over 80% of our land. So keeping 14 center pivots over 1,400 acres of land running efficiently can save thousands and thousands of gallons of water an hour. We use soil moisture sensors in our soil, which monitor the moisture in the soil up to 14 feet deep. We receive data every day on our cell phone from the soil moisture probe telling us how deep our roots are growing and how much moisture is there and whether we need to irrigate or not. So utilizing this technology has saved a tremendous amount of water and energy because we're watering more efficiently. We're just not turning those pivots on and watching them go around. We're also in the process of updating our sprinklers on our system for more efficient watering. Our newest pivot actually has variable rate water application, which means it waters more where needed and less down in the valleys where not as much needed. This technology will be used more as we can justify the cost. Right now, the cost falls right on us. Our farm and every farm uses a lot of energy to operate. We use renewable fuels like biodiesel and ethanol as much as possible. We heard of the many benefits of those. Our center pivots run on diesel, natural gas, and electric. We've got a wide variety. We're transitioning our diesel-powered engines to more electric when it makes sense economically. There are some small payments out there farmers are trying to utilize, but again, you got to go out there and find them. So what's unique on our farm is we have solar panels on our new shop that we built in 2022. So our home place on our farm is completely powered by solar energy. This will provide power for our grain bins, cattle waters, all the shop equipment, and the entire household that sits on the home place is run by these solar panels. That cost, we figure, is going to take over 10 years to recoup because it was a lot of initial cost. There was just a desire within our family farm to just be able to operate off the grid and to provide our own energy. And hopefully, eventually, it will pay off economically. As you can see, reducing our carbon footprint and our environmental impact over our land is not something that we as farmers talk about. It's rather something we integrate into our decision-making and actions every single day. It's just who we are. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Anne. You certainly are doing a lot, and it's great to hear that you're heading into your fourth generation on the farm. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. So like the previous two farmers, I want to say how cool it was to hear from the scientists first. in their perspective of research that's going on, but I really look forward to giving you the boots on the ground perspective. So I'm a cattle rancher in the Flint Hills of Kansas. As you can see from my background, it is a grassland. If you've ever driven through Kansas, you may have a totally different perspective. You think it's dry and flat. But in eastern Kansas, you have to get off I-70 and you have to come south and get to look around and see the grasslands that we have. They're native grasslands and they're pretty special. Blythe Family Farms was begun in 1890 with my husband's great-great-grandfather. And my husband and I run it today, and we are already transitioning to our kids. So we have 3 sons that are all 3 home on the ranch. 2 are full-time employees on the ranch and beginning to, take over management possibilities and all of that as well, responsibilities. We have also 2 girls that are very interested in maintaining a position on the ranch, but do not want to be full-time. One's a surgeon and the other one's in software. So we need to make sure that everybody has room and space because this is the land that we love and it matters so much. So on Blythe Family Farms, we do farm a little. We raise some cash crops that specifically support our livestock operation, but mostly we are an Angus cattle ranch. We raise around 500 mama cows. We have 400 bred heifers every year for sale. And then I sell somewhere around 50 to 75 registered Angus bulls each year, mostly locally, but the heifers sell nationally. We live in an area called the Flint Hills. As you can see, it's rolling hills. The original Flint Hills was pristine grass. It is not planted. It is not fertilized. It is managed in such a way that we maintain as much as we can without trees. So grassland is an interesting perspective versus trees. Grass stores the carbon below the ground, whereas trees store most of their carbon above ground. So we just simply have to make sure that we control the invasive species, which would be the trees and the woody shrubs. And that then allows us to utilize the biodiversity of the natural prairie. Once again, we don't plant this grass. This is what was here originally, and we're really lucky to be able to utilize that. So it's grasslands that the roots go 20 feet deep into the soil, down through a lot of rock. It's very shallow topsoil. So the one thing that we like to remind people of is so much of the United States is grassland west of the Mississippi River, right? We've got an awful lot of grassland out there, and places like the Flint Hills is tall grass prairie, but it's really not very good for crops. We do grow a few crops, as you've heard, and not very far from us where the Flint Hills isn't. We do have better soil and deeper topsoil, but we've got an awful lot of rock here. So when the pioneers first arrived here on the prairie, they realized that it took a lot of work to try to plow up the prairie. Not only was the mass of roots so dense, but also that the rock just kept getting pulled up. So they decided that the buffalo really did very well on the prairie and realized that that would be similar situation for cows. So this land is cow country. It's absolutely beautiful. There are millions of head of cattle that come into the Flint Hills, the tall grass prairie every year, and spend a good part of their summer on the tall grass prairie. We have year-round cattle, but we manage the prairie so that we are grazing from about May to October. So it is, interestingly enough, the other thing I want to point out about the prairie is that globally, 1/3 of carbon stores are in grassland. I don't have the figure specifically for the United States, but we store and keep that carbon in the soil. We don't tear up this prairie. Remember, I said we don't fertilize it. We don't plant it. We don't tear up this prairie. So the carbon stores that we have on our grass are already thousands of years old, if not millions of years old. Realistically, we do have to face the fact that agriculture, but in my perspective today, specifically cattle, do emit greenhouse gases. We do realize that that is a challenge for us. But I think there's a number of things that we have to remember when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions. We also have to take into account the entire picture. So we're going to talk today more about how, and Anne mentioned too, about feeding our cattle some of the byproducts that are created from growing methane or making methane out of corn. Also, some of the local things that are manufacturing plants that have certain byproducts that may have ended up in the landfill. Our cattle can use that. We call that upcycling. We also have to talk about the biodiversity that we are creating on the prairie. The Kansas Flint Hills actually is within the monarch byways, the flyways of the monarch butterfly, because we have so much biodiversity, especially my favorite plant. It's not in this picture, but my favorite plant is the butterfly milkweed. And so we have a lot of different milkweed plants. There are thousands of plants on the prairie. Honestly, we don't want to see one grass throughout, right? We want to see a variety of the different plants, and from what plants are there that I see, I can tell you how well that grass has been grazed. I can tell you if it's well managed. But I think we also have to look at the whole picture as far as nutrition. The farmers and ranchers are caring for the land and the water and the animals, but we're also providing food and fiber to feed the world, right? Everything adds to our carbon emissions. Can we do better? Absolutely. We absolutely need to do a better job. And we are doing a better job already. Honestly, from the 1970s to 2022, without even talking about sustainability or carbon sequestration, we have reduced the nation's cow herd size by a third, but we've maintained the amount of beef we produce. So we're already doing a better job without even targeting it as far as saying sustainability or climate change. But we have to keep in mind that we are providing food. In all of agriculture, there are ways that we can mitigate what we're doing and do a better job and be very efficient, but we really are the most efficient in the world. The United States can continue to do better, but it needs to be so that we're not decreasing our efficiencies and our quality, right? We talk many times about using a new technology or using a new feed stuff. And I think the value of that is really awesome and it looks great, but the research has to be done. Does it help my cows? Does it make my cows more healthy? Does it help them raise a calf every year? Does it help those calves be bigger, healthier, stronger calves that produce more meat, right? So those things have to be met. Those requirements have to be met for us to be able to utilize a new technology. I want to tell you just briefly about the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. I am a former chairman. The cool thing about the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is that it has members from all across the value chain. So we have farmers and ranchers like me, feed yard owners and operators. We have packers and processors. We have then also retailers involved in the roundtable as members. And then we also have those environmental organizations that have been important in the whole conversation through many, many years. Those environmental organizations have been really important in the conversations with us to make sure that we are on track and addressing those needs that consumers and activists and environmentalists are needing. We also have members that are educational institutions, so those research opportunities, those people that are really on the cutting edge of what is out there, what are the statistics, what is the information. And the value of having the entire chain involved is that we may move slowly in our decisions and our conversation, but everyone is involved to make sure that the decisions we make towards improving beef sustainability in the United States are supported by everyone within that value chain. So we feel like sometimes we're making slow progress, but we are making progress because that is the goal of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. We can talk all day about some of the progress that's been made, and I will probably continue to do some of that today, but I'm really pleased to be able to be a part of this group and representing the US Roundtable, who has been very involved in the USFRA through the years, and we're pleased to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Debbie. US Roundtable really kicked things off a number of years ago, right? As one of the first collaborations across the food value chain, and just remarkable success. We're going to open it up to Q&A now. I'm going to throw it back to Marilyn with the first couple of questions. What tools do you anticipate having the greatest impact and results for on-farm success? And do you feel in general that farmers are making progress against these?
It's interesting. We did a life cycle assessment in 2008. Dairy did the LCA, and it showed that 2% of the greenhouse gases came from 2% of the country's greenhouse gases come from dairy. Since then, we have continued to make so many improvements, and so we decided this year to do another LCA. It's not yet complete, so I can't share the information yet, but we're hoping that it comes out here in the next couple months. And we'll be able to share that information. But science and research has given us the tools that we need, that we can use on our farms. Some of those were mentioned this morning. It's interesting to me, our diversity. When I look at the diversity of the dairy industry across the country, we have very small farms. We have very, very large farms. We have smart farms that use current technology. We have farms that are using technology from decades ago. And so we have to be able to provide tools that reach all of the farmers, understanding that every farm has a different system, and every farm has a different set of tools that they need to be able to improve. Every farmer wants to improve. Every farmer wants to continue, but it's going to look differently. There's not a cookie cutter solution. We have many, many solutions, but they're not cookie cutter. So when we think about the tools that farmers need, there is such a large toolbox for us to draw from. I mentioned a methane digester. That, as I said, that's not something that every farm can use or will use, but it is one of the tools that we have. Rotating crops, soil quality, improving soil quality. There are tools that we can use in that arena. When we talk about livestock and dairy, I have to mention also animal care. Animal care is something that even though people would say, "Oh, that's not a climate issue," it is a consumer issue, and so it is something that consumers have a strong eye on. And so animal care and how well we are treating our animals is very, very important to the consumer, and I think that's part of the equation. Genetics is a tool, I think, that is often underrated. And when we look at the genetic makeup of a cow and a dairy animal, there have been improvements made to improve the emissions and improve the methane in the genetic makeup of the cow. And I think that's something that genetics will continue to improve. And when we look at our efficiency on our farm, the butter fat on our farm has been really high. We have Holsteins. It's very unusual for Holstein. 10 years ago, it was unheard of for Holsteins to have a 4.0 butter fat. Now we do, and which means we are more efficient today than we were 10 years ago. And so it's those little tools that come together. But I think it's also communicating to farmers that there's not an expectancy that we all do everything. But we need to do something. We need to make improvements. And I think Ann mentioned, you know, they're trying something new next year by planting rye. And so, you know, we always will think outside the box and always think in ways, and we're going to go back to that toolbox and look for those specific tools that will help our farm. And it'll change year to year, but that's what we love to do as farmers.
Thanks, Marilyn. That's great. So a question for Ann has come in for you over the wire here. It's a little technical maybe, but maybe not for you. For Ann. Ann, do you use any biological products to decompose the corn residue? If so, which ones?
Not at this time. There's a lot of products out there on the market, and they have really strong selling points. Most of our corn stalks are grazed, so that helps bring back some of the residue. So not only do we graze our feeders, because we kind of run a small, we do run a small feedlot, but we also take cow, calf in the winter, and they graze our stock. So that helps with the residue.
Over for Debbie, and maybe this question everyone can answer as well. What are some of the other benefits that agriculture can provide as a climate solution? I know you talked about a couple of them, but maybe go into a little bit more detail. And then what is the future of your operation in particular and your industry in general?
So yes, we talked just a little bit already about some of the things that we feel like are important. So when you talk about climate change or the climate and how we can make improvements and make changes, you have to consider that there is so much more than just carbon, right? There are other greenhouse gases. There are things that we need to focus on, but we also need to maintain biodiversity. We also need to be able to assist with water quality, water clarity. I'm not in an area that does much irrigation. We don't have very many places that need irrigated that are heavily crop areas in the eastern part of Kansas, but I know other places are. But we're focused on making sure that the water that we use, first of all, it's mostly green water, that which falls down on as far as rainwater, but we catch it in ponds. Right. And we want to make sure that those ponds are, they were originally conservation ponds that were specifically built to make sure that the water that ended up in the reservoirs was good, clean water. Well, so now we can also utilize those for our cattle. They are cattle water. So that's really vitally important to us to make sure that we've got good quality, clean water. You know, the biodiversity that I mentioned is so very important, especially in these native areas. I told you about how we're on the butterfly flyway, but also wildlife. We have found on our ranch what's good for the cow is good for wildlife, right? Specifically good for upland birds. My son runs a hunting opportunity, but also we find that we have improved the populations of many different wildlife here in eastern Kansas around our area. And I feel like that's really vitally important that we make sure that we're caring for the animals that are not just domesticated animals, right? We need to also consider land use. So one of the things that we have found, and I guess ranchers always knew this, right? But we've actually found this through research, that cattle can help us make sure that we can keep this land in grass. This land is not usable for a lot of farming, right? So we utilize this land in terms of growing beef that is really good for us to utilize for nutritional ways, but also it makes sure that we keep this land in grass, because as soon as you tear it out, you're releasing thousands of years of carbon. So we want to make sure that that grass will continue to be in the hands of the farmers and ranchers. So here's the other part of that. And I mentioned a little bit that my sons are starting to take over our operation. So transition planning seems like a total tangent to sustainability, but it's actually tremendously vital. So many times, if we don't make the plan to pass on the ranch to the next generation, whoever that is, whether it's children or nieces or nephews, or selling it to a younger person that's involved in agriculture, then it will get broken up into smaller tracts. Houses will be built. Possibly, I think I'm pretty far away from any areas where there's manufacturing, but I'm guessing Ann and Marilyn are probably a little bit closer, Marilyn specifically, that, you know, your land could go for very high prices and be completely concreted over. It's really vital that we keep this land in agriculture, and transition planning and figuring out how to pass it on to the next generation is really important. So not only are we supporting the food and fiber production, but we're also supporting the communities, the people around us, our families, and passing on that love of farming and ranching, as well as the fact that it is a business to pass on. You know, there's so many things that are involved, and I really appreciated Marilyn mentioning the cattle care, the animal care. Often when you talk about sustainability, a consumer first thinks of animal welfare. And so it's really important that we as farmers and ranchers are comfortable in talking about what we do on the farm and ranch. You know, in the past, we've just been really busy. We just get our job done, right? And it used to be in the 60s and 70s and you know, even closer times, we just shipped the food on, right? We just made sure there was plenty of beef in the market to be able to purchase. But guess what? People want to know more about it now. People want to see. So we have to take time. It's not that there's a lot of things changing, especially in the animal care world. There's some improvements, and definitely genetics is a major efficiency. But you know, I think that the fact that animal welfare is a tremendous part of any farm and ranch that has livestock, you know, that's for us is really, really vital. So the future of Blythe Family Farms is I think really good. We've already been 5 generations. We've got the 6th generation working out there right now. We're going to go vaccinate some calves this afternoon. And I foresee, through the work that my husband and I have done, to make sure that our sons are very knowledgeable and able to run the ranch. I think we've made sure that Blythe Family Farms will continue for another more generations, 3, 4, 5, who knows?
That's great. Thank you. Ann?
So your question was what's coming into the future? Rephrase your question, Tim.
What other benefits that agriculture can provide for climate solutions that you've been working on, and what is the future of?
Yeah, so many benefits that, you know, I shared. You know, we're using less nitrogen, we're using less water, and through genetics in our crops, in our grains, we're producing more per acre. So we're providing that vital food for the world, but we're really doing it more efficiently than ever before. And I think the keys to that are technology, are getting us there. And it had, we heard over and over again, and I just can't say it enough. It has to make business sense on our farm to adopt these practices. It just has to make business sense. And Marty, I appreciated your tangent, not really a tangent, but your sermon about, you know, if society truly values these contributions that we're making on the farm, is there a way that we can share the costs and the economics of this? Because all of society is benefiting from these improvements we're making on our farm, and we need to share the costs, and because we're burdening the risk when we take on new tests, and it may work and it may not. Well, there's a lot of things that don't work right away. We have to refine and we have to problem solve to figure out how it's going to work specifically on our soil, with our equipment, with our land. So we've got to do those practical applications, and any economic benefits that can be shared would be beneficial for those of us on the ground, in the land.
Thanks, Ann. Marilyn?
Yeah, when I think about the benefits, I think about the quality protein that we are producing in dairy, the nutrient dense protein that dairy and beef will really help to feed the world. When you look at the population and you look at the concerns around climate change and around climate issues, this has to be part of the conversation. Where's the food going to come from? How are we equipping farmers across the globe, not just in the United States, but across the globe? How are we empowering farmers to be able to produce a quality protein that we can fulfill those needs? There's a lot of parts across the world that are the children, the people are not getting the quality protein that they need. And so we have to be able to, we can't limit farmers on their production, because the food needs it's strong, and people will need to eat, and we have a great protein, a great food source. It's safe, it's affordable, and so I can't help but mention that. Soil quality is also something that I think about. And when you look at the improvements made in the past 10 years, I can't help think but that there will continue to be more improvements made. And Debbie is exactly right. Our soil and our the quality of our soil it goes very deep. It's not just from year to year, it's from generation to generation. I think, we're going to hopefully get some quality information coming from this NAS report soon. I think it can't come out soon enough for us. And it's just so important for us to see the science that is coming from that report. So I'm looking forward to that. Last week at our dairy management, which is the dairy checkoff meeting, we had a panel of 4 farmers, and each one of the dairy farmers came from a different part of the country. Each one of them mentioned water as an issue, but each issue was very different. So water quality and water quantity is an issue across the country. I have a different water issue because I'm 40 minutes north of the bay. So water quality is a huge concern of ours, and it's always been on our radar. When you go into the West and even, parts of the Midwest, it's not water quality, it's water quantity. And is it available for the farmers to be able to continue to farm? So I think it's just water in general is going to be something that we have to look for. When I think about the future of our farm, Dwayne and I have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. The boys are scattered across the globe in various jobs. Our daughter was teaching school until last year, and she decided, you know what, I'm coming back to the farm. And so our daughter's coming back. She started full-time with us in June, and she is currently looking into making ice cream as a value added. Aside from the work that she's doing on the farm, she's going to make ice cream. So we're looking forward to that. We're building a creamery on the farm. It'll be wholesale, not retail at this point. We're going to try to walk before we run. but we are looking forward to that. And she has 2 young boys that are also, they're very young, so a lot can happen between now and then. But I know they're interested in the farm. They're very happy to be back on the farm as well.
That's wonderful, Marilyn.
Tim, I think you're frozen again, so I may just jump in and wrap up our panel. Thank you, Debbie and Marilyn, for just a terrific real-world practical perspective that complements the wonderful research, science, evidence, theory that was discussed on the earlier panel. Just a powerhouse, a group of speakers. Thank you all for your time today.